Not everything always goes according to plan, and when it comes to demolishing gigantic structures made of tons of concrete and explosives, any mistake can turn into a true disaster. Around the world, engineers and demolition experts have faced moments of pure chaos, in which buildings toppled the wrong way, implosions failed unexpectedly, or toxic dust covered entire cities. It is exactly this that we will see here today. The demolition of the chimney of the Ohio Edison Tower in Springfield, Ohio, United States, also happened unexpectedly and went viral at the time. In November 2010, a chimney of about 85 meters belonging to the Mad River Power Plant, operated by Ohio Edison, was imploded. However, it did not fall as planned. Rather than collapsing to the northeast into a cleared area, it tipped to the southeast. This caused damage to the generators and brought down two 12,500-volt lines, leaving about 4,000 customers without electricity for several hours. No one was injured, but professionals, the press, and the public nearly had to run to avoid the snapped power lines. Videos of the incident circulated widely, attracting international attention. Later, the company sued the subcontractors, alleging negligence, including failure to cut through a steel bar, which allegedly led to the uncontrolled fall. Damages were estimated at more than $19 million. A settlement was reached just before trial, 4 years later. The demolition of the former Philips Tower in Eindhoven, Netherlands, carried out on the 1st of September 2012, did not go as planned, and part of the structure did not collapse as expected, remaining standing and generating widespread attention. The Philips building in question, known as the VH building, was an old administrative headquarters of about 70 meters in height, designed with a suspended structure and considered architecturally significant. The demolition was executed with about 90 kilograms of dynamite, planned as a controlled implosion. After the blast, most of the building fell as predicted, but the elevator shaft remained intact, raising concerns about stability and hazardous remnants that had to be removed manually. The video shows the moment of the explosion, followed by a central structure still standing, swaying slightly as if resisting the fall, which drew massive attention. Eindhoven city authorities expanded the safety perimeter and did not allow residents to return until a new technical assessment, precisely because of the risk posed by the remaining structure. The video went viral on specialized channels and social networks, often cited as an example of a demolition that did not go as expected and thus could not be left out here. Another demolition that went wrong was that of the Red Road Flats in Glasgow, United Kingdom, considered one of the most emblematic controlled implosion failures in Europe. The Red Road Flats housing complex, built in the 1960s, was known as one of the tallest residential towers in Europe and had iconic status in Glasgow. In October 2015, 6 towers were imploded simultaneously as part of an urban regeneration plan. However, 2 of the 6 towers remained partially standing, with about 10 to 13 floors intact in each, surprising the onlookers and going viral on social media through event recordings. A later technical evaluation concluded that those towers were more robust than estimated. Built with substantially stronger steel frameworks, they exceeded the designer's expectations. Now, let us talk about one of the most dramatic implosion episodes gone wrong in the United States. The approximately 48-meter chimney of an old factory more than 112 years old resisted 2 blasting attempts, both failing to bring it down. Engineers discovered that its base was thicker and more resilient than anticipated. After the failed explosions, operator Tim Pfeiffer used an excavator to dig out and weaken the base manually. At the moment he had the machine right next to it, the structure finally fell, collapsing directly onto the excavator, bricks and debris covering the cab in a desperate scene. Fortunately, despite the fright and how impossible it seemed for the operator to escape unscathed, he walked away with only a few minor scratches and lived by sheer luck. The United States Occupational Safety and Health Administration opened an official investigation, interviewing witnesses and evaluating failures in the explosives plan and demolition process. Eventually, the demolition contractor was convicted for improper storage and record-keeping of explosives, receiving 2 years of probation after a judicial agreement. The demolition of a silo in April 2018 in Denmark became one of the most striking examples of a controlled implosion gone wrong. A 53-meter silo located at the port of Vordingborg on the southern part of the island of Zealand, Denmark, was demolished with explosives in a public event. Approximately 10 kilograms of explosives were used after months of preparation. The plan intended the silo to fall into a pre-cleared area, but after detonation, the structure slid and toppled in the opposite direction, colliding with a building housing a library, a music school, and a cultural archive. Fortunately, no one was injured, as the area had been evacuated. The impact partially damaged the facade of the cultural center, especially the administrative offices, scattering dust, debris, and glass. The interior, however, remained mostly intact. Another notorious demolition failure occurred at the Clarion Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada, United States, becoming viral due to how parts of the structure resisted the planned implosion. The 12-story hotel casino, originally built in 1970 and known by various names over the decades, was imploded at around 3 o'clock in the morning on the 10th of February 2015 to make way for new developments near the Las Vegas Convention Center. Approximately 2 tons of explosives were detonated to collapse the entire structure. Most of the building fell, but the elevator core remained standing, dropping only 4 stories and leaning slightly. This was entirely unplanned and complicated the work of the crews on site. The central shaft was blocked by dust and debris, preventing its full collapse in situ. Teams then had to attach steel cables to a crane to finally bring down what remained of the elevator core in an extra operation lasting about 13 hours after the initial event. A tragic accident occurred on the 9th of June 2021 in Gwangju, South Korea, when a 5-story building under demolition collapsed onto a parked bus, causing multiple fatalities. During the demolition, part of the building collapsed and fell directly onto a bus stopped beside the site, creating a massive cloud of dust and debris. The bus was carrying 17 people. 9 died on impact and 8 were seriously injured. All workers at the site had already been evacuated moments before the collapse, which is why none of them were hurt. Authorities found that the demolition procedure did not follow required standards. Workers began the process from the lower floors instead of the upper ones, compromising structural stability. Furthermore, there were multiple levels of subcontracting. The main company outsourced to a medium-sized firm, which in turn subcontracted a smaller one. This led to document fraud and cost-cutting measures, directly impacting operational safety. Investigators arrested 4 people for involuntary negligence, 3 workers from 2 demolition firms, and 1 supervisor. Another notable case happened in Little Rock, Arkansas, United States, where a demolition became one of the most talked-about failed implosions, visually striking in its own right. The 93-year-old bridge, built in 1923 to connect Little Rock to North Little Rock, was deemed structurally deficient and slated for demolition and replacement by a safer structure. During the controlled implosion, explosives were set to destroy the steel arch and the section of the bridge over the Arkansas River. The collapse was expected within 30 seconds. However, after detonation, the bridge remained almost intact, albeit visibly weakened. Although the pre-blast cuts were made as planned, the weight of the structure caused parts to collapse onto themselves rather than into the river as intended. What should have been a quick process turned into a 5-hour operation to manually bring down the arches, using cables and tugboats on barges until the bridge finally fell into the river. An incident involving the demolition of a building in Ankara, Turkey, became iconic for going completely out of control, though fortunately without injuries. On the 1st of August 2009, a 25-meter flour mill factory from the early 20th century, inactive since the 1980s, was demolished to make way for a shopping center. The controlled blast caused the factory to topple sideways and slide until it lay on its side, rather than collapsing vertically as expected. The movement was so abrupt that the building passed dangerously close to neighboring structures. A local resident reported that the building fell like a matchbox and that by mere meters it nearly hit the adjacent building, making the situation extremely dangerous. An incident known as the Leaning Tower of Liuzhou was a disastrous demolition in December 2009 in Liuzhou, China. A 22-story residential tower was subjected to a controlled implosion that split the building in half, but only one half fully collapsed. The other half remained leaning on the rubble like an improvised leaning tower in the urban landscape. The implosion used carefully placed explosives expecting a total collapse. However, due to a technical failure, this did not occur. After the shocking sight and evident risk, crews had to intervene manually to safely bring down the pending half. Now, let us discuss the impressive controlled demolition of 15 unfinished buildings in Kunming, Yunnan, China, which took place on the 27th of August 2021. The 15 skyscrapers from the second phase of the development were demolished simultaneously in a large-scale operation. Approximately 4,600 kilograms of explosives were placed at 85,000 detonation points across the buildings. The operation lasted only 45 seconds from ignition to total collapse. Construction had begun in 2011 but was halted for lack of funds and remained abandoned for over 8 years before being deemed unviable for completion. The underground levels were flooded by rainwater, affecting the building's stability, one of the reasons cited for the demolition. This was considered the largest single demolition in China to date, with an exclusion zone of 500,000 square meters and mobilization of 2,000 rescue and emergency support professionals. This is surely another of the most emblematic demolition failures. In May 2013, a 4,000-ton industrial silo southwest of Brisbane, Australia, was targeted by a controlled explosion planned to bring it down completely. Approximately 100 kilograms of explosives were distributed inside the silo. Despite the blast, the structure did not fall but leaned to one side, resembling the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and remained so for about 40 minutes. Demolition experts were visibly embarrassed. Instead of the expected architectural collapse, the team had to push the structure manually with excavators until it finally fell completely, a process that took over half an hour. The disastrous demolition of the chimney at the old Crawford Power Plant in the Little Village neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois, United States, failed significantly and severely affected the local community. In April 2020, a controlled implosion was carried out on the plant's chimney to make way for a new development. However, the event generated a massive toxic dust cloud that spread across 6 city blocks. Although subsequent tests indicated that no asbestos or heavy metals exceeded permissible levels, the contaminated dust cloud alarmed residents and raised serious health concerns, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. The dust containment plan, which included intensive water spraying by tanker trucks and support from the fire department for misting, was not effectively implemented on the day of the implosion as planned. The city's oversight also failed. Revised plans were not fully reviewed, and those responsible were accused of permitting an environmentally negligent operation without adequate supervision. The city of Chicago issued 16 fines totaling $68,000 against the contractor for failing to comply with dust mitigation and public safety protocols. The failed demolition of the Zip Feed Tower in South Dakota, United States, on the 3rd of December 2005 became famous for the structure's unexpected resilience and the affectionate nickname Leaning Zip Tower. The 62-meter grain elevator tower, built in 1956, was the tallest occupiable building in South Dakota until its closure in 2000. In 2005, the building was marked for demolition by blowing out the vertical silos to make way for urban redevelopment. In December of that year, the team attempted to implode the tower using explosives placed in a ring at the base and between silos after cutting reinforcement bars throughout the structure. Although the plan called for the building to topple like a tree, it instead sank vertically into its own basement and leaned to one side, remaining standing amid rubble in a spectacle that caused general embarrassment and surprise. An assessment concluded that the explosives and cuts applied were insufficient to compromise the vertical integrity of the structure. The base gave way, but the tower's body remained rigid enough to sink in place rather than fall horizontally as expected. The demolition was completed manually 2 weeks later using a wrecking ball crane to bring down the remaining structure. The episode involving Montgomery House near Liverpool, United Kingdom, is another emblematic example of a demolition that failed spectacularly. In April 2016, two 15-story residential towers were to be demolished simultaneously by controlled explosion. However, both towers remained standing after the blast. About 2 hours later, one tower collapsed partially on its own, but the other tower, Montgomery House, remained intact even after a second demolition attempt. The explosives were insufficient to compromise the robust concrete structure, resulting in a total failure of the initial procedure. The demolition team then resorted to a manual, gradual approach, using heavy equipment to demolish a few floors per day until reaching a safe height. It took about 10 days for the structure to fall completely. Approximately 70 households were evacuated and temporarily rehoused in hotels, as the safety zone remained active for an indefinite period. The failure was so severe that it cost the demolition company an estimated £600,000 sterling. Don't forget to subscribe so you can watch more videos like this.